I think everyone, in their own way, recognizes at various times in their lives that something is missing, that there's a piece missing, and we're not sure what it is. The culture, a lot of it is politicians and advertisers, are promoting consumption, that if we just work harder, earn more, buy more, own more, repair and replace more, we'll be happier. And of course, you figure that out pretty early in life, that that's a bit of a treadmill or a rat race. But some of it is necessary. You have to have an income stream. But the idea of conspicuous consumption, making a show of it, or competing with others, or making your whole life about the acquisition. But my point is that I think the missing piece that we're looking for is in the area of consciousness, awareness, a deeper understanding of who we really are.
Beyond politics and above organized religion, a moral authority exists known globally as the Ageless Wisdom. It is the study of consciousness, the mystery of awareness, which cannot be measured yet will not be denied. This podcast from Michael Benner's Ageless Wisdom Salon features lessons in metaphysics, mysticism, and esoteric philosophy. Those who attend live on Zoom may also participate in group meditation and roundtable discussions. Register for our newsletter at michaelbenner.com. Welcome to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School with
Michael Benner.
I'm looking forward to this class. We're going to talk about emotions and emotional intelligence. You know, when I was in school, psychology was mostly about abnormal psych and, to some extent, running rats through mazes, studying animal behavior. And it was in the 60s that people began to study positive psychology. The idea of maybe in addition to studying abnormal psych and trying to find various treatments to help people get better, we could study positive psychology and find out what happy, successful people are doing right and emulate that for people who were essentially healthy and well-adjusted but wanted more. I think everyone, in their own way, recognizes at various times in their lives that something is missing, that there's a piece missing, and we're not sure what it is. The culture, a lot of it is politicians and advertisers, are promoting consumption, that if we just work harder, earn more, buy more, own more, repair and replace more, we'll be happier. And of course, you figure that out pretty early in life, that that's a bit of a treadmill or a rat race. But some of it is necessary. You have to have an income stream if you're going to pay your mortgage or your rent and put gas in the car and buy the car in the first place and all that goes with it. So some consumption obviously is unavoidable, but the idea of conspicuous consumption, making a show of it, or competing with others, or making your whole life about the acquisition. I marvel at these oligarchs now that are stepping forward. It's hard to conceive of what $400 billion really is. It's like comprehending the universe. It's such a big, big number that to even get your head around it is difficult. But here, the world's richest man has essentially purchased our government. And the first thing that he does is eviscerate programs that feed the hungriest people in the world. And the media doesn't seem to know how to be upfront and honest and candid about it. But My point is that I think the missing piece that we're looking for is in the area of consciousness, awareness, a deeper understanding of who we really are. And today I'm going to suggest, as I have in the past, but it bears repetition, that that's less about what we think of ourselves than what we care about. That to understand ourselves with our thoughts is a risky business. It's fraught with self-loathing and criticism and a lot of negativity. The more we think about ourselves, the more we counsel fears of inadequacy, the more likely we are to compare and compete rather than honor our uniqueness. It just doesn't seem to occur to most people that if each of us has our own DNA and fingerprints, I like to say fingerprint evidence and DNA proof of our individuality. Given that we've talked about the paradox of the one and the many, that both things are true, we're all part of one life and one thing. There's only one of us here. And yet in form, we take these unique, individual, and apparently separated identities. But thought, logic, analysis, reasoning, cognition, the mental nature is very good at knowing the world, but it doesn't really speak very well to the self. Again, because it just tends to be so negative and so self-critical. So we have a second intelligence called emotional intelligence. And this was not studied in psychology until the 1980s. I talked about abnormal psych and then in the 60s, positive psychology. It wasn't really until the 1980s that people began to study emotions. And so today we're going to talk about two models, one in particular, of emotions and emotional intelligence. One by a fellow named Ekman, who suggested that there are 6 basic emotions that he based largely on facial expressions. And then another model that I think is more refined, more highly developed, by a Dr. Plutchik. It's a funny name, Plutchik, Plutchik. Both of these models have been arranged in wheels, although I'm not going to present it today as a wheel, but rather as pairs. And while Ekman's model is 6 basic emotions, happiness and sadness, anger and fear, surprise and disgust, Plutchik's model includes 8 basic emotions and then a series of derivatives from there that radiate out. Plutchik has suggested in his work, again, mostly published in the 1980s, that there are roughly 34,000 emotions, or maybe better said, 34,000 words for emotional feelings. And words are just symbols, of course. Words are allegory and metaphor. Feelings blend. In fact, not only with each other, but with thoughts to some extent. Thoughts and feelings entangle like flavor and aroma. It's hard to distinguish flavor without aroma. If you ever get sick, get a cold and a stuffy nose, you notice that things don't taste quite right. And you can't really distinguish flavor from aroma. You can, but again, there's an interreliance or an interdependence. And so too with emotions and thoughts. There's debate in psychology about which is primary, actually. Many will argue that thoughts give rise to emotions, but it seems apparent that emotions can also generate a thought stream. And so I always think of it as a kind of a ping-pong game, a back and forth between thought and feeling and thought, feeling, thought, feeling, thought, feeling, thought, feeling. You know what I'm saying? The problem is, again, when you think about a feeling, it's just another thought. You're not going to get very far. So how do you feel a feeling? Well, because feelings, emotional feelings, and there are some who even distinguish between an emotion and an emotional feeling, which I will not do. I don't see any value in that. It's like distinguishing between anxiety and fear. I think it's trivial. It's all the same stuff. So emotions stand between thoughts and behavior in the mental, emotional, physical trinity in humanity, the mind, the heart, and the body, thoughts, feelings, behavior, action. Emotions are always in the middle. And that's because they are influenced by thoughts, but they're felt in the body. In other words, it's like the Venn diagram of the two circles that overlap in that oval section where they overlap, which is called in sacred geometry, that's called the vesica piscis, fish bladder. And if you rotate it 90 degrees, or if you think of the intersecting circles as being one above the other, you notice that oval looks a lot like the fish that the Christians put on the back of their car. But they don't know why they do that. They don't know what that represents. They think it may have to do with the fishes and the loaves, or Christ's apostles, many of them being fishermen or something. But actually, it's part of sacred geometry. It's part of that intersection of the mental and the physical. The intelligence of feelings is intuition, not logic. I think it's true to say that intuition is more emotional than mental. Although some people are so cut off from their emotional nature, so repressed, that they rely to such a large degree on their thoughts that they would experience intuition as a form of reasoning. The proper order, of course, is to think about it. That's the energy. And then you feel it, which is the force. And it's the feeling that drives, as a force, the energy into action or behavior. But many people will act out of an emotion without thinking, and that's where the word rationalization, I think, is appropriate. Did you think about what you did? No, only after I did it. Well, then why did you do it? If you didn't think about it, well, because I felt like it. And that's where people get real defensive, you know. I did it because I felt like it. You want to make something out of it? You want to step outside? Right? People get real defensive about their right to behave without thought. Thoughts will not reveal the meaning of feelings. Thinking about feelings is of very little value. You're just spinning your wheels when you think about feelings. We could think of thoughts as being quantitative and feelings being qualitative, but I'm not sure that in and of itself is sufficient. How do I understand a feeling? You sit with it. You welcome it in. Positive or negative, pleasure or pain, you let it come to you. You sit with it mindfully, that is, without judgment, to the best of your ability in the present, resisting the temptation to drift into the past or into the future. But sit with it. How does it feel right now? Knowing that it will morph. As you sit in the present moment without judgment, experiencing the feeling, it will kaleidoscopically unfold. It will change. The idea is to watch it change. If it doesn't change, it's because you're grasping. You're clutching or holding on to the feeling for dear life. Especially pain. This is so curious. We might think we need to hold on to love or happiness or joy or peace of mind or contentment or the positive feeling. I want to hold on to that. But most of what we hold on to is the pain. We've talked in the past, even last week, about the three poisons, and was pointing out that greed or desire is about attachment and holding on. That could be to a material thing, an object. It could be a relationship. It could be an identity. It could be a thought. It could be a feeling. We hold on to all kinds of things, belief systems, our biases and prejudices. Holding on is just a natural reflex that results from the fact that we're deluded, that's the third poison, ignorance, into believing that we're separate and alone and adrift. So we're always holding on for fear that we're going to float away because we're experiencing ourselves as so separate and distinct. And that's the lack of wisdom. That's illusion, delusion, or ignorance. But in addition to attachment and ignorance, there's aversion, which is the second poison, anger and hatred, fear. And that involves a holding on, too. You might think, oh, no, I'm pushing it away. But when you try to push something away, you reach out and touch it. And you hold on to it, even though you think you're pushing it away. And then you say, well, I feel stuck. But you're not stuck. You're holding on. So the secret to what do I do when I feel stuck is to let go. Well, if you're convinced that, in fact, you're stuck, that it's holding on to you, that might not occur to you. But if you know it's not true, that your pain, your fear, your suffering, your anxiety, your heartache, your grief is not holding on to you, you're holding on to it, then you can take a breath and let it go. Watch it dissolve, let it fade away. Since all things are impermanent, especially when you choose not to hold on. So the language of emotions, understanding emotions, is not to think about them, but to allow the intuition to bubble up spontaneously, to occur to you, and to trust your first impression. Because that feeling of, on second thought, well, wait a minute, maybe, well, yeah, but what if? Now you're right back to thinking, aren't you? You see? And if you're thinking, you're not the mindful awareness of the one who observes the thought rise and fall, or observes the feeling rise and fall, or the behavior for that matter. That's what we talked about last week, the four foundations of mindfulness: the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the phenomenal, the world around us. Negative feelings are very valuable just because they hurt, and they're called negative. They're your friends, they're your allies. Whether it's fear or anger or jealousy or envy or contempt or hatred. My God, Michael, how could hatred be an ally or a friend? The secret, of course, unsaid to this point, but gosh, it's so important, is to take responsibility for the feeling. And you live in a world where few people are aware of this. The vast majority of our friends and neighbors, and I dare say most of us for most of our lives, have been under the impression that we're victims of feelings that have been done to us by others. That so-and-so made me feel. And so what do? The feeling causes us to fixate or obsess on the individual or the group or the event or the circumstance that's causing the feeling, as if by changing the world or changing them, yelling at this person, threatening them, wagging your finger in their face, setting them straight, teach them a lesson. I can't let them get away with this, right? That will change your feeling. No. It's your dashboard. It's it's like the gas gauge on the dashboard doesn't tell you about how much gas is in somebody else's car. It's your car. It's your anger. It's your hatred. It's your fear. It's always about the individual that feels it. And so to learn to develop the awareness so that I think we'll always take the initial hit. If somebody says something insulting to you, it's going to hurt, and you're going to immediately start to fixate on them and obsess on why would they do that? Why would they say that? How could they be so nasty and so cruel? Don't they know they're hurting me? Probably not. Was it their intention? How often does it occur to us to even ask ourselves, I wonder what their intention was? Often we're just not interested at all in their intention. We just know that they made me feel this way, and I got to figure them out and control them. All nonsense. So to take ownership of the feelings are responses, and the ability to understand them is our responsibility. So I touched on Paul Ekman from the University of California, San Francisco. He based his 6 basic emotions on facial expressions: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust are all reflected in the face. That was the nature of his work. At almost the same time, in the early 80s, Dr. Robert Plutchik from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine based his study of emotions on those triggering behaviors that seem to have high survival values. Interestingly, both Ekman and Plutchik are what are known as evolutionary psychologists. They look at human behavior, thought, feeling behavior, as a function of evolution, survival. That whole idea, what works, continues on. So Plutchik added 2 more. He calls happiness joy. So he has happiness, sadness, anger, and fear, only he calls it joy, sadness, anger, and fear. And then anticipation, surprise, trust, and disgust as pairs. Now, if you Google this, you'll find wheels of emotions. In both cases, these are laid out in wheels. But I think for our purposes, it's easiest if we just approach it initially in terms of the pairs of emotions. So we begin with joy and sadness, or happiness and sadness, as sort of a pair, And then he expands on these with less than joy and greater than joy. So less than joy is serenity or peace of mind, tranquility. Greater than joy are ecstasy. Now, again, you can argue with these words. By the way, the reason love is not a feeling, I think I put this on the handout near the top. Yeah, love is not an emotional feeling. That's a surprise to most people. Where's love? And why is it not an emotional feeling? It's because it goes beyond reflex. Feelings are reflexive initially, as I just described. Our goal as people that are developing awareness or consciousness is to transmute them or transform them or redeem them from basic reflexes to conscious responses. Well, love goes beyond reflex to a decision and a commitment. And love brings up all kinds of feelings. Why did O.J. kill his wife? Because he loved her. It created jealousy. And the jealousy led to anger. And the jealousy that led to the anger led to hatred. And that expressed itself as violence. And so he killed the woman that he loved, the mother of his children, right? So love can bring up all kinds of feelings, sympathy and empathy and compassion and kindness, but a lot of negative feelings as well. So love is much more complex, and that's why it's not included by either of these researchers in their models. So the closest we have to that would be happiness or joy. The antithesis, I don't know if opposite would be the right word of joy, would be sadness. And Plutchik is suggesting that a minimal amount of sadness, less than sadness, would be pensiveness. And a greater form of sadness, an expansive sadness, is grief and loss. The next pair is anger and fear, and I think you can see right off the bat the relationship between anger and fear. Less than anger, I'm annoyed. Yeah, sort of pissed, not angry. Greater than anger is rage in this particular model. And so too with fear. Less than fear is apprehension. I'm not afraid, but I have my concerns. It's very important to know that just a little bit of fear is still fear. And again, what is fear? It's what you don't know. What I don't know about what? Well, it could be the world. It often is, or appears to be. But on a deeper level, it's what you don't know about yourself and your ability to cope with the world. So to understand yourself better, to confront your fears, to embrace your fears, to recognize fear in any form, from panic to slightly nervous, there's a lot of value in examining the really subtle little fears and not say, oh, well, I wasn't afraid. Fear is something big and overwhelming. Fear is something that generates anger, and I start yelling and throwing stuff or running away, or there's lots of responses to fear, maybe getting silent, sulking. But again, in Plutchik's model here, we have a little bit of fear as apprehension. A great amount of fear would be terror. Next pair, anticipation and surprise. A little bit of anticipation as well. I'm interested. Not quite anticipating. I'm just sort of curious. And then great amount of anticipation would be vigilance. It's a great word. I like vigilance. And surprise would be the pairing of anticipation. Anticipation hasn't happened yet. Surprise, it's already. By the way, I should mention before I go to that, the reason anger and fear are paired, if it's not completely obvious yet, is that anger is often an expression of fear, where the fear, the apprehension, even the terror may not yet be expressed. It's just held inside. So anger can be a very healthy thing if we acknowledge it, move through it, understand it. The danger with both anger and fear is holding on. That's where it becomes a serious problem. But as a signal, as a hit, wow, I'm getting really upset about this. To see it a mile away. It's a whole idea of developing awareness, to see it coming a mile away while it's still manageable. It's often said if you name a feeling, you can manage it. If you're not aware of it, it will manage you. So a little bit of surprise is amazement. I'm amazed. Fascinated might be a good word there. And then a great amount of surprise would be distraction. These are easily argued with or debated. This is just a model that he put out after a lot of work and research. So I don't think these are carved in granite, but I think they're valuable as an entry point to study your emotional nature and therefore better understand yourself. Again, that's my argument. You will not know yourself well by thinking about you, thinking about your behavior, thinking about thinking, or thinking about feeling. Thoughts are for the world. They're objects. Thoughts are objective. Feelings are subjective. You are the subject. Divinity is the ultimate subject, of course. And then finally, trust and disgust. I think trust and distrust. Less than trust is acceptance. Greater than trust, admiration. And disgust, total aversion, rejection, repulsion. A little bit of disgust is I'm just bored. And a great amount is loathing.
While